We may, we may identify a series of adjustments then through which the state has managed to reassert its hold over the people, through which it has perpetuated its authoritarian and autocratic management of society. It has continuously denied the real diversity of civil society, which it can only comprehend in terms of social fragmentation, and against which it has mobilized the idealized fantasy of the Turkish people as one. As the Solomon argues that ethnic and religious groups have been driven to see themselves as outsiders, suggesting that the Turkish state has created a social environment where even other than ethnic corporate groups being to acquire the look and feel of contentious minorities in their own right. The official culture has been closed to the real Turkey. The return of the repressed. There is still iron in the soul of the state, seemingly devoid of political imagination or nuance. It continues to pursue the uncompromising defense of its adamantine principles. In the society at large, however, there have been some significant developments since the mid 1980s, opening up new cultural and political possibilities. In the West, they tend to be seen in simplistic terms as the breakdown of modernization, the rise of Islamic fundamentalism, or the reawakening of Turkic expansionism. When considered more closely and carefully, though, it is clear that something rather more interesting is at issue. The proliferation of Islamic publications, the growing recognition of ethnic heterogeneity, the increasing references to the Ottoman past are all about the real Turkey reasserting itself against official and state culture. We may see these developments in terms of the return of the elements that were repressed in the Kemalist culture: religion, ethnic diversity, the imperial heritage. They reflect, as Niloufer Gold maintains, the resurgence of civil society, a culture that is autonomous from the state, and now with its tongue untied. The other Turkey is making its declaration of independence, making its reality felt, manifesting the complexity of its social being. This was nothing to do with cultural reversion to tradition, religion, or whatever, as many Western commentators like to believe. What are at issue are precisely questions about modern identity and values in Turkey. The Kemalist state elite is no longer the exclusive source of modernity in Turkey, argues Ali Kasansigil, and there is now a broader debate concerning modernity and democracy, cultural identity, and humanism open to both the world and the Islamic moral order. We should, of course, be cautious in our estimation of these developments. They are in their very early stages, and there are certainly dangers as well as potential. At the same time, however, we should be open to the possibilities they offer for greater cultural creativity and plural democracy. First, let us consider that has propelled this transformation, which have happened in a remarkably short time. We may identify both external and internal factors. As to the former, Turkey, like most of the world's cultures, has been significantly affected by the forces of globalization. The increasing transnationalization of markets, the growth of global media and communications, the mobility of populations, tourism, migration, have all worked toward the dissolution of the old rigidities in the national culture. The end of the Cold War and the putting into place of new world order have also had dramatic consequences for Turkey. There is a new eastward orientation as relations are re-established with Central Asia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan. Since 1989, Turkey's historical and strategic significance has become increasingly apparent in the Middle East, the Balkans, and the Black Sea area. The Cold War isolationism of its political culture is now ceding to a new sense of engagement and mission. The Turks may now come to see themselves once again at the center of a world emerging around them, rather than at the tail end of an European world that is increasingly uncertain about whether or not it sees Turkey as part of itself, as well as enhancing Turkish self-esteem. In the world context, there have been significant implications for collective identity. Turks have become increasingly aware of their Ottoman past, though there has also been a certain reactivation of Turkism and Pan-Turkism. They have also become more aware of their ethnic diversity as developments in such areas as the Balkans or the Caucasus remind them of where many Turks have their origins. The state's exhortations for national unity and consensus against external threat have also lost much of their force with the collapse of the Soviet Union, making way, as in other European countries, for the expression of internal differences. The old schism between left and right has to a large extent been replaced by ethnic, cultural, and religious factors of difference and disagreement. In sum, developments in the external environment have helped to loosen the rigidities of cultural and political identity, bringing the real Turkey into focus and thereby fostering the development of civil society. There were also crucial developments within Turkey contributing to the unblocking of cultural and political life. The military coup in 1980 created a political and cultural vacuum, and as I have already indicated, it was apparent that the Kemalist ideology was no longer capable of filling it. There was the need to find a new compromise which would not sacrifice Kemalist principles, but which could hold Turkish society together and give it a new identity in changing times. This is what the new Anavatan Partisi ANAP Motherland Party, which has established after the coup under the leadership of Turgut Özal, set out to achieve. The project of what has been called Özalism involved the unification of the mainstream political groupings under the banner of ANAP, among with the refocusing of the cultural orientation of Turkish society. Osal spoke of a general reconciliation and a new synthesis by which he intended a bring he intended a general he intended a bringing together of religious conservative circles and liberal Kemalist tendencies. The new cultural orientation emphasizes the significance of Islam as a unifying element in the society. The nationalism and religious ideas of the Turkish Islamic synthesis were influential within one wing of ANAP. In this respect, Ozalism may be seen as a conservative project in continuity with the earlier political culture of unity and consensus, merely giving a religious inflection to an authoritarian state. That is one way of seeing the political reconfigurations of the 80s. But Osal's new approach also contained other, more dynamic elements that have to be taken into account. A crucial factor here was the new economic policy developed by ANAP, with the intention of opening up market forces and integrating Turkey into the global economy. Osal was opposed to what he called the deification of the state, arguing that development was no longer the prerogative only of the state. The objective was a new liberalized economic order open to foreign investment and trade. Islam's role of the state, while inculcating a sense of freedom and responsibility in the ordinary people, Osal was looking for ways to stimulate the economy from below. He was also aspiring to a new kind of modernization. He is said to have expressed envy of the Japanese and their ability to combine technological development with the preservation of their identity. Osal's hope was that Turkey could become conservative like the Japanese, but also universal and global. These economic changes had profound cultural implications, but Osal pushed it further with more directly cultural and political aspirations, trying to set in motion what he called a mental revolution. His objective was to foster a more plural cultural identity, as well as recognizing and reinstating traditional aspects of the cultural. Osal himself boasted of uttering the word Kurd, thereby paving the way for the destruction of a taboo. Religious taboos were also broken. Osal explicitly criticized the secular intelligentsia. They must recognize, he argued, quote, that the days of imposing one's own elitist values on the masses are over, values which have been borrowed in a wholesale manner in the guise of universalism and expressed in a foreign or at best in a hybrid idiom. In no way does this approach deny the universal features of culture. It only emphasizes that no people can be creative unless it draws its strength mainly from its own cultural heritage through an intensive updating and upgrading effort. Osal's aspirations was to engage the real Turkey in the modernization process. In place of top-down reform, he sought a change from below. In other words, the real change. In this respect, he was beginning to release political culture from its Kemalist shackles. Ozalism was a phenomenon then of considerable complexity in its combination of conservatism and change. It maintained stability through its emphasis on continuity with both the Kemalists and his Islamic past, yet at the same time it sought to release repressed and dynamic elements in the culture. Transformation was necessary if Turkey was to become synchronized with a changing world and if it was to find the real idiom of its cultural identity. Once the psychic repression has been lifted, lost identities and experiences began to be recovered. A diversity of voices made themselves heard, all damaging recognition, and an energy was released. Ethnic diversity and the diversity of geographical origins have become increasingly recognized and appreciated in Turkish cultural identity. Turks are more and more conscious of the demographic heterogeneity and complexity which evolved out of the Ottoman Empire. The one nation contains a whole array of molecular identities. Laz, Georgians, Abkhazians, Azeris, Kurds, Turkmen, Yoruks, Circassians, Greeks, Albanians, Bosnians, Tatars, etc. Turks have now discovered lost homelands, lost worlds. This recovery of identities is in line with a resurgent concern with ethnicity across Europe as a whole. What has been particularly significant in the Turkish context has been the reactivation of historical affiliations and connections through the collapse of the Cold War order and boundaries. These are identities that are shared across the borders of nation-states. We may consider these developments in terms of cultural revitalization and enrichment, but there are also clear dangers. If these were to become primary identifications, the situation could become rapidly destabilized. One has the sense that certain Western European observers, in the name of cultural authenticity, have a perverse interest in encouraging the proliferation of small national peoples in this part of the world. The dangers of ethnic confrontation are manifest in the effective war between the Turkish state and the Kurdish guerrillas. In the southeast, whilst there have been certain cultural concessions to the Kurds since 1991, they have been free to speak their own language and practice their own customs. Other more significant ones continue to be denied to them. Kurdish broadcasting, education in Kurdish, as the situation in the Kurdish area becomes more and more destructive. For one journalist, the term ethnic cleansing does not seem out of place. The need for a political solution of cultural confrontation becomes ever more urgent. It has now become possible to speak of federalism as a way forward. Ozal considered a Basque solution to the problem. The issue will be to find some means of decentralization without fragmentation, and not only in the case of the Kurds. Ozal seems to have looked to Islam as a unifying identity over and above ethnic differences. But of course, such an approach will not be accepted among secular Turks.